Okay, so this is just going to be an introduction to price discrimination, what it is and why firms want to do it and how it works. I just want to point out when we say discrimination here, we're not talking about sort of negative discrimination on race or sex or gender. People do charge different prices based on those things, but there's laws against that. We're talking about not illegal discrimination. We're talking about charging different prices. Yes, differential pricing, but differential pricing based on the fact that people just have different willingnesses to pay. The good's worth more to some people. Some people have more inelastic demand than other people. And so we want to take advantage of that. If you think about it, you've got your demand curve, and whatever the price is, well, for monopolists, remember they have the downward sloping demand curve and their marginal cost curve, and they produce, or marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and charge that price. And so what happens, as we've learned, is there's all this deadweight loss because these units are worth more to people. Remember, the demand curve is willingness to pay. These are worth more than they cost to make. This would be the allocatively efficient level of output. These are worth more than they cost to make, but they're not being made because it's not worth it to the monopolist, because their marginal revenue is less than marginal cost, so they're not going to make it. Even though price is greater than marginal cost, what people are willing to pay is greater than marginal cost. Marginal revenue, how much my revenue goes up, is less than marginal cost, and so I'm not going to make it. So there's the deadweight loss. And then this area, below the demand curve, below what people are willing to pay and above price, as we know, is consumer surplus. So there's all this potential surplus as a seller that I'm not getting. Some of it, this is potential surplus. Remember, deadweight loss is potential gains from trade that aren't being realized. And consumer surplus, remember what consumer surplus is. It's what consumers are willing to pay less what they have to pay. It's the difference between what they would have paid me and what I'm actually charging them. Thinking about it from a consumer's perspective, consumer surplus is a great benefit. Thinking about it from a producer's perspective, consumer surplus is lost opportunity. They were willing to pay me more than I'm charging them. All this surplus could be mine. They're willing to pay it. By definition, the height of the demand curve shows what they're willing to pay. I could charge them a higher price and they would pay it. But because I'm a single price monopolist, if this is my equilibrium price, I sell all my units for the same price. So I end up selling to some people for less than they're willing to pay, and I end up generating this deadweight loss, this lost surplus that none of us are getting because it's not worth it to me. So what if, you can see the incentive here, right? The incentive is there are units that people are willing to pay me more for than I'm charging them. Yes, that marginal unit, that last unit, I can just charge P star for. But all these people before that, they were willing to pay more. Why can't I charge the highest price everybody's willing to pay for each unit? Why do I have to charge one price for each unit? The answer is there's no reason. There's no law. There's no rule. And we'll talk for a second about why it doesn't happen all the time. But you can see, if I could charge the most people are willing to pay for every unit, I would, this is called perfect price discrimination, where you charge maximum willingness to pay for all units. If I could perfectly price discriminate, I could take consumer surplus and turn it all into my surplus. There would be no difference between what they're willing to pay. I would charge everybody exactly what they're willing to pay, and they would pay it because by definition, they're willing to pay that. So I would charge everybody their willingness to pay. I would turn all that consumer surplus into my surplus. And because I don't have to drop my price on every previous unit sold, my marginal revenue is not this black line now. My marginal revenue is now just price. How much does my revenue go up when I sell another unit? It goes up by whatever price I charge. Because there's none of that, if I sell more, I have to drop price on everything, which was why marginal revenue is always less than price for firms with downward sloping demand curve. So I would keep producing as long as what I could sell it for is more than it cost me to make. I would produce, and situation for price discrimination, I would reduce out to the allocatably efficient level of output. I would produce all the units that are worth more than they cost to make. All potential surplus in the market would be realized, and it would all be mine. So you can see the appeal of price discrimination. If you don't have to just charge one price, if you're stuck charging one price for everything, yeah, then what we learned about monopoly or firms with downward sloping demand curve and what their profit maximizing looks like is correct. But if you can charge different prices, you can make a lot more money. You can take some of that surplus, that green area and red area, the consumer surplus and the deadweight loss, surplus that could exist that you weren't getting, you can take that and make it yours. We don't see a lot of perfect price discrimination because how would you know? How could you tell people's maximum willingness to pay? What if you ask them? The person's in line at Safeway with a loaf of bread and the checker says, what are you willing to pay for that bread? Are you going to tell them the truth? No. So we don't see a lot of perfect price discrimination because you can't tell people's willingness to pay, and you could spend a lot of time asking them about it. Like if you've ever bought a car dealers spend a lot of time talking to you and figuring out where your limits are, and they start with a really high price and they come down slowly and they ask about all sorts of things, trying to elicit what your true willingness to pay is, trying to get as close as they can to the height of the demand curve. They're trying to take away as much of your consumer surplus as you can, and you're trying not to give it to them. I have a lot of fun buying cars. But the thing is, that takes a lot of time, right? You could be in a car dealer's office for 3 hours negotiating over the price of the car. That may be worth it if they're going to make $1,000 extra off of you. But to negotiate for even a half hour to get 50 cents more on a loaf of bread, when minimum wage in California is $14 an hour, not going to be worth it. So in a lot of cases, it's just, it would be really, really valuable if the seller could perfectly price discriminate. They would do it if they could, and it's not illegal charging you what you're willing to pay, but it's just impossible to figure out in any cost-efficient way, figure out people's maximum willingness to pay. If we get to a stage in life where, in human evolution, where we have like barcodes on our head or something like that, and you go to the checker and Safeway and they just scan all your products, scan all your groceries, and then just scan your forehead, and whatever you're willing to pay right then is what you get charged, then we'd see this all the time. If the technology, if the method of finding out your maximum willingness to pay were that simple, there would be perfect price discrimination everywhere. So the only reason we're not doing it is because it's just not feasible sometimes. Perfect price discrimination, obviously. So maybe in cars or any sort of really big ticket items where it's worth it, you might see attempts closer to perfect price discrimination, or like at flea markets or places where there's a lot of haggling over everyday goods. You know, you go to buy some peaches and they're like, oh, how much are you willing to pay for these peaches? I'll give you this much, I'll give you this much. A lot of places that's expected and it's normal, and it's typically when the opportunity cost of your time is low, right? So if you're going to be at a flea market or a farmer's market and you're just going to, you're going to be there all day and you're just trying to sell what you can sell, if you get 10 cents more out of somebody, it hasn't cost you anything because you're kind of just standing there anyhow. Even if you get 10 cents more, it's 10 cents more than you had, right? And so again, you're only going to spend the time trying to elicit people's maximum willingness to pay or close to it when you can, when it's worth it, when it's worth what you give up, when it's worth the opportunity cost of your time, or when it's worth hiring somebody to spend the time doing it, like car dealers do, and like the people who sell bread do not. So we don't see a lot of perfect price discrimination, but we do see a lot of, think about it this way, other types of discrimination, like, let's say here's our, I'm not going to put in all the curves just to keep it clean. But let's say here's I don't know, we're selling something, and here's all this consumer surplus. All that consumer surplus means people are willing to pay that much more than I'm charging. I may not be able to charge people's maximum willingness to pay, but what if I just charged P1 for the first Q1 units and then drop my price to P2 for the units from Q1 to Q2? I wouldn't extract all of that consumer surplus, but I would take all of that. I would take all of that area and turn it into producer surplus. And this would be like buy one, get one free. Or buy one, get one half off, right? Or so, that's not quite half off, but let's pretend it was. And the price is $60 for the first one. And then if you buy two, we're gonna drop the price to $30. And so you can see this, you could say if the price were $60, I'd sell one. If the price is dropped to $30, I'd sell two. If I just were a single price monopolist. And so here my total revenue would be 60, here my total revenue would be 60. But what if I said, BOGO, buy one, get one, half off. BOGO's shorthand for buy one, get one. So so that's one option. I could just charge everyone this 60 for all. I could charge 30 for all, or I could say buy one, get one half off. I'd sell 2 units. They'd pay $60 for the first one, and they'd be willing to pay $30 for the second one. I sell 2 units, and I get a total revenue of $90. It looks like a deal to the consumer. It is a deal to the consumer, but it also is a way, it's a second-degree price discrimination. It's a way to extract more of your willingness to pay. And that's what price discrimination is all about. It's a way of extracting consumer surplus and turning it into producer surplus. If you're willing to pay more than I'm charging you, I want to find a way to charge you more. So, this is, discrimination by quantity is that category of price discrimination. It's also like Costco, where when you buy in bulk, you get a lower price. If you buy all 3 of these things, we're going to give you a low price. We're not going to sell you one of those for a third of the price. We're not going to do that. We're going to know you're willing to pay a lot for the first, some for the second, some for the third, and we're going to charge you some price. We're going to say we're going to bundle those all together, and we're going to charge you some price that we know is under your total willingness to pay, but we're going to get more than if we were charging you a single price and tried to sell 3. We could do some numerical examples, but I don't really want to get too caught up in this, but just say there's so many examples of price discrimination, and all comes down to, we know people have different willingness to pay, and discrimination by quantity is based on we know people have downward sloping demand curves. So we want to drop the price for successive units. You're willing to pay a lot for the first one, you're willing to pay less for the second and less for the third because of diminishing margin utility. We want to find a way to charge you a lot for the first and then charge you less for the second. So buy one, get one half off is a perfect way to do that. It's a lot easier than having you buy one and after I ring you up at the register then saying, oh, would you like another one, and we'll drop the price. You just get to do that, dropping the price on the second one right there. But you extract that chunk of consumer surplus. I remember when I got business cards when I first came to Pacific, and I went to the printing place and they said your first 500 cards were going to be $20. And I thought, well, that's good. I didn't know how much business cards cost. I'm like, okay, that sounds fine. And they said, you can get another 500. And I was already saying, I don't need another 500. And they said, for $4. I'm like, what? $20 for the first, and then the next 500 are only $4? Okay, yeah, sure, give me, because they knew I had a really steeply downward sloping demand curve, but they still made it work. I paid that $4, got my extra 20 cards, my extra 500 cards, and by the time I got promoted and had a new title and a new name and everything, I had probably only used 300 of them. But they sucked me in with that discrimination by quantity. They sold me more than I would have bought by dropping the price because they know that I would need a lower price to buy more. So buy one, get one half off, bulk buying, or things like that, or even how they put sodas or beers together in a 6-pack, and here's the price for a 6-pack. You can't just pull one out and get a sixth of that price for one. It doesn't work that way. What they're doing is taking a bunch of your higher willingness to pay for that first one and having you sort of apply it to the rest of them. And so they're extracting, again, I could do a numerical example, and I can share one with you if you let me know you want to see one, but I don't want to make this video any longer than it already is. But the idea is there. You want to find ways to take advantage of the fact that people have high willingness to pay for the first unit and lower willingnesses to pay for the subsequent units. So that discrimination by quantity is really common. And the other really, really common form of price discrimination is discrimination by group or by characteristic. And again, we're not talking about racial or gender discrimination or things like that. Not that those don't happen, but I'm talking about the ones that are legal. Just because people have different willingnesses to pay. And so if you think about it, if you have two groups of people and somebody, let's look at it this way, let's call them group A and group B. And let's say one group is, let's say it's airline travel. And one group is the business travelers, and one group is the vacation travelers. And the business travelers are going to have a pretty high and pretty inelastic demand. They need to go where they need to go. If the price is higher, if you have to be there for business, you kind of have to be there for business, and the firm's paying. And so, but leisure travelers, they have probably a much more elastic demand because they can go other places, they can drive instead of fly, they have maybe not be that inelastic, but it's a lot more elastic. Fact of the travel industry. So you have these two groups with very, very different demands. These will intersect the y-axis way up here somewhere. But if you just charge one price, let's just say it's a constant marginal cost for simplicity. If you just charge one price, you'd sell this much in market A for a price of PA, and you'd sell this much in market B for a price of PB. Oops. That's not, I'm saying if you could charge two prices, obviously that's not if you charge one price. If you can charge two prices, you want to charge a high price in market A and a low price in market B. You want to charge a high price here because then you can extract a whole bunch of their consumer surplus. Not all of it, but more than if you were a single price seller. And over here, you charge a lower price, so at least you're keeping those people in the market. Because you can see, if you charge PB, sorry, that's PA. If you charge PA to everyone, none of these people would be in the market. You'd miss out on all that surplus. If you charge PB to everyone, you'd lose all that surplus because these people would only be paying PB. So if you can separate the groups, and that's a key to this, you have to be able to tell the groups apart. If you can separate the groups, you can charge a high price to the people with a high willingness to pay with inelastic demand and extract a lot of their consumer surplus, but charge a low price to the people with much more elastic demand and lower willingness to pay, so at least you're keeping them in the market. And you see this all the time with things like senior citizen discounts or student discounts, groups that are historically relatively lower income or much more price responsive. Even seniors with fairly significant income, senior citizens, if they're retired, tend to be very price responsive because they may have a lot of money, but they have no idea how long they're going to live, and they don't want to outlive their money. And plus, if you're retired, you have a lot of time to search around for substitutes, so your demand's more elastic. So senior citizens discounts say, we'll keep the price low for you to attract you to our business, but for regular, senior citizens are regular too, but for people who are working and things like that in a steady income stream with a higher willingness to pay or less elastic demand, we'll charge them more. Or student discounts, right? Students often don't have very much money, and so they may, let's say at restaurants, they may say, oh, I'm not going to go out to eat, it's just not worth it, I can't afford it. We'll give you a student discount. Or haircuts, right? Students like, I'm not going to go to a hair salon because I'll just let my hair grow or cut it myself, right? But if they keep the price low for students, they attract them and then charge a higher price for the people with less elastic demand. So you see these sorts of it's sometimes called third degree price discrimination, but discrimination by group all the time. You see it in airlines. They can't ask you if you're a business travel. Well, they could, but who would tell them the truth? They'd say, is this travel for business or vacation? And everyone would say vacation because it's cheaper. right? So they can't do that, but they do all sorts of pricing things like charging you more if you don't stay over a Saturday night, because business people typically, if you travel up for business, Saturday's the one night you can be home, or things like that. So there's a lot of ways, because you can see there's so much profit in it. If we were a single price monopolist, we either lose all of that or lose all of this, or we couldn't get nearly the surplus we get. Even things like matinee versus evening movies, right? People have a lot more substitutes for what to do in the middle of the day because people work and do other things. Whereas sometimes on a Friday night, you really don't want to do anything else except maybe just go to the movie theater and chill, back in the pre-COVID days. And so people are willing to pay more for a Friday evening movie than for an afternoon movie or a Tuesday evening movie, which are often discounted. And that's why you see drink specials on Monday through Thursday night at places, but you don't see a lot of drink specials as much on Friday and Saturday nights, because that's when people are less elastic, right? They're more willing to pay because they really want to go out. So once you start looking around, you start seeing examples of price discrimination everywhere. Even things you wouldn't necessarily think, like a coupon, like a cents off coupon, 50 cents off, Colgate toothpaste or something like that. You take that to the store, you clip it out, or you print it out on your computer, or you get it on your phone, however you do it, and you go to the store with your coupon, and then you buy the product, whatever it is, and then you show them the coupon, and then they say, okay, and then they take the 50 cents off. Really, that coupon says a lot of stuff, blah, 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 blah. But really what that coupon is saying is, I'm a type B. The fact that you went to trouble to find that coupon, or like when you find coupon codes on the internet when you're buying something online, the fact that you went to Retail Me Not, found that coupon or that coupon code, remembered to use it, applied it, do all that, you're announcing that you're price responsive. You're willing to take an effort to try to find a lower price. So yeah, everyone could get the coupon, but a lot of people don't. So the people who aren't going to be bothered, they get charged the higher price. The people who are more price responsive will be bothered, and they're the ones that get to use the discount code, find the coupon, do those things. It's a way of having you self-select into which group you are. So they don't even say these people get this and these people get that. They just put it out there. It's going to be a little extra effort for you to do it, but if you do it, you're announcing that you're a type B, so you get the lower price. But you can see, because we've spent all this time, we were talking about monopoly, talking about the fact that you charge one price, and if you sell more, you have to lower your price on everything. That's true in a lot of cases because it's the easiest way to do things. And in order to price discriminate successfully, you have to be able to tell people apart what group has higher willingness to pay, or find ways to have them separate themselves, right? And the other thing that you have to do, not only distinguish between groups, but you have to be able to prevent resale. That's why you see a lot of price discrimination in things like admission to the movies, or eating out, or airline tickets, which you can't resell, because otherwise, if this were, say, textbooks, and we're like, we're going to charge seniors, juniors, and seniors a higher price because now you're in your major and you might be really wanting to learn the material, whereas some freshmen don't bother to buy textbooks, and so we'll keep the price lower for them. If they were charging freshmen and sophomores a lower price for textbooks at the bookstore than juniors and seniors, you'd see all the sales happen to freshmen and sophomores, and the freshmen and sophomores would resell them to the juniors and seniors. Arbitrage. And so you'd end up making all your sales at this low price, which wouldn't be worth it. So if it's not difficult or impossible to resale, you're going to make all your sales at the low price, and that whole charging one low price and one high price isn't going to be useful for you. So you have to have some market power. We've been talking about this at first in the context of monopoly, but any firm that has a downward sloping demand curve for the product, which means, as we'll see starting next lesson, any firm that's not perfectly competitive, any one along the imperfectly competitive market structure, has some control over their price. As long as you have some market power, some control over your price, you can engage in some of this price discrimination. If you can tell people apart, if you can distinguish by willingness to pay, not perfectly necessarily, but have some idea of what their demand curve looks like, and if you can prevent or make resale very unlikely. It's a really powerful way to make a lot of that consumer surplus turn into your own surplus.